Welcome into UGA Football Live with JC Shelton, where the dogs come to talk. Welcome in, everyone. UGA Football Live with JC Shelton, sitting here on a Friday afternoon ahead of Georgia-Auburn in Athens, in Sanford Stadium, Dooley Field, 3:30 kick on ABC. This game is one of my favorites. It always has been. The Deep South's oldest rivalry. The two first met in 1892. 1892, right? The automobile was 6 years old. That's a little history drop for you on UGA Football Live for you folks out there that appreciate that. I know I did. The car was 6 years old first time these two met. This rivalry gets really overshadowed, I think, a lot in the SEC. I mean, you have your, Auburn, Alabama, and the Iron Bowl. You have the world's largest outdoor cocktail party in Jacksonville. Now you have Texas and Oklahoma, who you're going to hear from those two fan bases. That game is now the biggest game in the conference each year. I think this rivalry is special because anything can happen for sure, and that's what makes rivalry specials overall. But I think in this one, the proximity to the programs. I have a lot of friends and Auburn alums who make the drive to Athens each year that this game is played in the Classic City and vice versa. Georgia folks that go down to Auburn each time. There's a lot of camaraderie there, and Georgia fans will say, well, if you don't get into Georgia, you go to Auburn. And that's probably true in some cases. I think we all know a couple of people have done that. But regardless, this matchup is one of my favorites. And we kind of witnessed one of the reasonings for that last year in Jordan Hare, one of the toughest places to play in the SEC, has been for a long time. You've sat here and listened on this show to former Georgia Bulldogs who've told you that same thing, whether they, trounced Auburn by 20 points or not, or had a close game or even lost in some cases. It's really, really tough place to play. And you saw that game kind of play out last year, and Georgia found itself down 10-0 in the first quarter. And this was, after the play in South Carolina a couple of weeks earlier and being down 14-3 in the first half. And Georgia's fan base was really volatile at this standpoint, right? Because you're riding a 2 straight national championships. You haven't lost a game in a very long time. So it's like, is this a barometer for the rest of the season? Turns out that was the game that Georgia was battle tested. And they went on a string of dominance. And then they killed Kentucky undefeated at the time the next week. And they just kind of went off to the races there until the SEC championship. But I think this game last year, we saw the rise of Carson Beck. We saw him engineer that comeback against Carolina, but this was in a totally different environment. First true road start, right? In one of the SEC's toughest places to play. He does the thing, connects with Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers had like 150-something yards and a touchdown, the game winner. Ladd McConkey got a couple of first downs, of big plays there. Carson had a great day in the end. And, I think that was the part for him that really upped his confidence, first off, up the trust from his teammates to him and himself as a first-year starter. So that's why I really like this game earlier in the season, too. It's a tough battle. You learn a lot from both teams. Now, this game for Auburn, and it's one of those teams that, you need 8 games to really know what you're looking at. But we're going to do our best to look at the Tigers here, the War Tigers fighting Eagles here for you ahead of the game. We'll get us set up nicely. You'll know what's going to happen, hopefully, right? So Georgia has won 7 straight dating back to 2017. All right. Auburn has scored a total of 26 points in the last 3 trips to Athens. Georgia scored 96. We talked about that game last year. Really, if you're getting into the weeds about it, Auburn was really, really good on the ground. And we'll get to kind of the difference between this game and previewing this one here in a bit. They really utilized the ground game. They run the RPO system. Hugh Freeze is known for that. He was doing it before it became really popular. Peyton Thorne, who we'll see in Athens, he got benched earlier in this season for Hank Brown. Brown threw 3 picks, I think it was, and then Peyton Thorne came back in. It's been a mess at quarterback for Hugh Freeze and the Tigers, but Peyton Thorne will get to start this weekend. He ran for 92 yards on 12 carries, had some gash plays, if you remember it. Jarquez Hunter, one of the better running backs in the SEC. I really like him. Kirby Smart and Georgia staff have a lot of respect for him. Kirby Smart talked about it earlier this week, and I think he's right. Hunter had 59 yards on 19 carries. They had 219 yards on the ground total. And that's important for one reason, because Georgia gave up 82 yards passing and an interception, also got an interception through the air. And that was still a really close game. Ultimately, Georgia wins by 7. So you think traditionally in the past, one-dimensional teams don't stick with Georgia because they're so balanced, usually offensive, defensively, top 5 in defense and offense last year. Excuse me. So you think about that as kind of the blueprint to beat Georgia is be really balanced, and they weren't, and they almost walked away with a win. So let's make this game interesting. Both staffs are very familiar with each other. Travaris Robinson, Georgia's defensive coordinator, co-defensive coordinator, come over from Alabama. He played at Auburn. You have Will Muschamp, who coached at Auburn, and some more ties there between both staffs. So these guys know each other. So I think that's what leads this game to be ultimately close at times. Georgia, last year's game, rushed for 107 yards total. And that was without Kendall Milton. And this was the time when Georgia's running back room was depleted by injury. Dejon Edwards had just come back. He was leading that game. And like I said, Brock Bowers had 8 catches for 157. Really had to step up in clutch moments to take that one back to Athens with a W in the win column. So let's talk about the biggest difference this year. What I see is Freeze really wants to throw the ball. And I think he thinks that is ultimately going to be the most successful strategy for them moving forward. I don't think he has the guys right now. I know you have Cam Coleman at receiver, right? I don't think Peyton Thor's the guy. And I think he thinks that, right? Because all the comments he's said about his quarterbacks and ball carriers fumbling the football, their turnovers have just absolutely decimated this team this year. It's really surprising, right? Because they average 7.6 yards per play, which is 8th in the country. Okay. They also have had noticeably more explosive plays overall, whether it be 20 yards, 40 yards, 60 yards, than Georgia has this year. So you consider that, and you say, well, you're sitting here 2-3, and you've played Arkansas and Oklahoma, an Oklahoma team that hasn't looked great on offense at all. It's one of the most unbalanced teams in the country. And you turn it over so much that while you should have ultimately won those games, you're sitting here at 2-3. Let me get I'm looking for them. They average 1.3 turnovers per game. They're like 130th in the country in turnovers. 9 interceptions, 6 fumbles. They're minus 11 in turnover margin. Georgia hadn't turned the ball over once heading into that game in Tuscaloosa against Alabama. 4 turnovers later, 3 interceptions by Beck, a fumble by Beck. He hadn't turned the ball over at all this year. And then that happens. I think that's a weird game for Georgia because they're typically a very disciplined team when it comes to hanging on to the football and penalty-wise. That's a whole different story this year. The SEC refs have been atrocious. But that's what's really, killing Auburn right now. I'd be surprised, to see what they can do without turning the football over a lot. Now, they turned the football over against Oklahoma in their last game. And that's what's really interesting to me about this Tigers team, too, is that Oklahoma game. Because they come in after losing to Arkansas, and that was like 5 turnovers in that game. Oklahoma has to make its first true SEC road game. They come to Jordan-Hare. It's an early kick. Like I said, tough place to play. Don't mean to beat that bush again, but tough place to play. They come in, and we already had a lot of questions about Oklahoma's offense. Their defense is really good, though. Auburn, we already noted their struggles on offense this year. Hugh Freeze has noted the struggles on offense this year. It's amazing how he kind of talks down to his players in his press conferences over and over again and just gets away with that at a place like Auburn. But regardless, Auburn was dominating that game. They have a 21-10 lead in the fourth quarter, right? They allow 17 unanswered points. Peyton Thorne throws a game-sealing interception. He had been so good, maybe the best game of his career up to that point. He went 21 of 32 with 338 and 3 touchdowns for an Auburn team that, has had to run the ball and has been so bad passing. And he has a game like that against a Brent Venables defense. And that defense is talented. They're well coached, and they were able to do that. Jarquez Hunter averaged 5.7 yards on the ground. So they were balanced. He passed well until he didn't. And, that defense got gassed in the fourth quarter, and Brian Hawkins kind of went off there at the end. So, what if Auburn has that kind of game? Can they pass to succeed against Georgia's defense? Georgia's allowing 166 through the air per game. and they're allowing 125 on the ground, no, 123 on the ground per game. And that Alabama game is going to spike those numbers. So it's really hard to kind of, base all your thoughts on that game. And especially when it comes to stats, because a game like that, Georgia's not going to have every week, probably not again this season if I had to wager any money on it. So I think when you think about Georgia's strengths, which is that secondary, which is Malachi Starks, Dalen Everett, Julian Humphrey, Daniel Harris, those guys in the secondary. Think about Dan Jackson, who led the team in tackles against Bama, had 10, had an interception as well. He played really well. Don't sleep on Dan Jackson, another historical former 3-star for the Bulldogs. That is a strength for Georgia. And their defensive front played better against Alabama. I'll rest on that. They had some bodies back, and Warren Brinson and Micah Williams. Those guys are probable for this week. I don't see them having a lot of success running the ball. If they do, it'll be kind of concerning, because if they have success, they'll have to run it outside, right? And they'll have to utilize the QB run outside. And that's exactly what Milton and that Alabama offense did in the first half against Georgia. And Kirby Smart talked about it, and CJ Allen, the middle linebacker for Georgia, he talked about it as well after the game. They weren't in the right sets. They just got out schemed there in the first half. I don't think Georgia and that coaching staff, some of the smartest minds in defensive football in the country, I don't think they make that mistake again. So I think it's going to be very hard for Auburn to get that going consistently. Yeah, sure, they might go off for 10, 12, 15 yards at one time. They might have a string of first, second down plays that could get rushing statistics. But can you do it consistently, right? I don't think so. I don't think, in my best opinion, my humble opinion, my best is that I don't think Auburn runs the ball extremely well against Georgia's defense here on Saturday afternoon, which is going to force them to pass. And that's kind of Georgia's strength, at least, in coming up with turnovers, coming up with pass breakups, and forcing you to long yardage situations on third down. So I think Auburn's be able to move the ball here and there between the 20s. Red zone wise, they haven't been great. One of the worst stats in the country in the red zone. They're at 100th in red zone offense, scoring at 75%. They are better in the red zone at 17th, at 71%, playing defense in the red zone. Interestingly enough, I think this game could be a critical point for Georgia, though. Beyond the statistical look at how this game's going to turn out, beyond the line, which Georgia opened at 23.5, moved to 24, now sitting here at 22, Georgia by 22 on Friday at 6 p.m. So that could change. But beyond all that, I think this is a critical point for Georgia, because I think the best teams, and we've seen this done to Georgia in the past, is championship caliber teams, they get hit in the mouth. And the next week they have an opportunity, like an SEC matchup, a rivalry matchup in your home stadium, 3:30 kick, which is the best kick according to the players and the guests we've had on this show. It was all their favorite time to kick off as well. The energy is going to be palpable. This team, and just knowing how it strives for greatness, strives for perfection execution wise, they know they can be the best team in the country. They know they didn't look like it in Tuscaloosa. They have this opportunity in front of them. I think they answer the bell in a big way on Saturday. I really do. I really do. Auburn, defensively, they're going to have one of the best games in 2 seasons to keep up with Georgia here. I think Carson Beck and that offense, I think they're going to have an opportunity to really establish the run, noting Auburn's offensive struggles. They're going to have time to establish the run. It's not going to be like a 21-0 first quarter at Alabama to be able to establish run. I think Georgia does that, becomes more balanced. The deep shots, I think, are going to be a lot better downfield passing and intermediate than we've seen this season because of that second half against Alabama, because you had success on one-on-one balls with Colby Young, with Dominic Lovett, with Dylan Bell. You set up route combinations to hit over the top in the second half against Alabama. You saw the success there. Carson Beck saw what could be done with his receivers. He now trusts these guys more, and vice versa. Mike Bobo and that offensive staff, they know what's worked. Right. And you can argue Alabama And Auburn, similar defensive makeup. I think Auburn's a little bit more experienced in the back end. But it's going to be very, very tough for those guys to match up with a guy like Dominic Lovett, Dylan Bell, Colby Young. London Humphreys is probable for this game. I know he missed last week against Alabama with a reported illness. I'm not exactly sure. It's not always the best to trust those reports. But he'll likely be back. He's listed as probable as of Friday, right? So you get a lot of speed back there. How do you match up with these guys? Because Georgia's going to want to go deep if you show them a one high safety look. And that's what Alabama played like the entire game. And that's a big reason for Georgia's comeback, taking advantage of those opportunities. So I think the best way to talk about this is expectations for Auburn and Georgia here. Georgia against Auburn. Is you want to see Carson Beck trust himself, trust his receivers, right, and take advantage of those opportunities. I know it was based on the game last week that Georgia did that in the second half, and Carson Beck passed down the field with conviction. Receivers won battles with conviction, right? They knew they needed points, right? You want to see that on a play-by-play basis if you're a Georgia fan, considering what's down the road. You go to Texas in 2 weeks, playing the number 2 team in the country that hasn't lost a game, right? One of the most complete teams in the country. You got to go there in their house. And you have a chance to shut them up. But these 2 weeks, Auburn and Mississippi State, these have to be games to where you're still doing the things that you're going to have to do against Texas, which means be balanced, right? Don't dip and dunk when you don't have to. Do what the defense gives you, of course, right? Establish the run game. Get Trevor Etienne as another, let's say, number 2 or letter B as far as what you want to see from the Dogs this week. Establish a run. Get Trevor Etienne going. Get Branson Robinson some carries to get him comfortable because we know the talent he has. He's coming off that season-ending injury. We know that. This is an opportunity to get him a bunch of carries, so he's absolutely a tool you can use on the road against Texas and against Ole Miss, at home against Tennessee. You can use him too. He's a different physical presence, and without Roderick Robinson, Georgia doesn't have that right now. He doesn't have that physical presence. Trevor Etienne's looked really good to be physical at times, but he's not going to run you over necessarily. Branson has that, right? Former power lifter, right? He is that guy. All right, get him going so you can use him as a tool moving forward. This is the opportunity. So I look for Georgia to establish that ground game early. But also, I think a lot of play action over the top, and Georgia goes for those deep balls in the 50-50s, and they win some of them, right? And let's say number 3 or letter C here, as far as what you want to see, Georgia's receivers. So many drops in critical points in that first half against Alabama. Also drops in the second half, didn't end up being huge difference makers, right? But that first half was, right? That was what allowed Alabama to get that lead that ultimately was not overcome after Alabama scored that last 75-yard touchdown to Ryan Williams. So that's offensively what you want to see. Defensively, it is building on this run game, right? And Jalen Milroe, I mean, Alabama didn't do crap in between the tackles against Georgia. It was outside zone. It was RPO, QB run, QB keeper, the edge, right? And I don't even think it was the Georgia's single. I don't think you can single it out on one player. You know, a lot of people want to yell at Chaz Chambliss. They want to talk bad about Tyron Ingram Dawkins and such. I don't think it was one player in that game, right? I think it was a concerted effort by Alabama to really attack those areas using different sets and personnel. And that's where Georgia lacked from a coaching perspective, I think, which is crazy to say. It doesn't happen a lot, but that's why I think Georgia's going to answer the bell here. I think the edge play is going to be much better. I think Georgia's going to force runs up the middle. And then that leaves that secondary to eat. Auburn's going to have to pass to keep this game competitive. And even if they were getting themselves a chance to win, they would have to pass successfully and be really, really good in the red zone, which they haven't showed so far. Georgia is good in the red zone defensively and offensively, for that matter. So keys for defense, better edge play as far as do not get exposed on the edge, and that's what happened last week. Those are the things you can fix, I think. And having Micah Williams a little bit healthier than he was last week, I think will be big. And Jordan Hall is still listed as questionable for this quick injury update. 2 stress fractures for the former 5-star in the preseason. Hasn't played a snap this year, and he is still questionable heading into this one. We already talked about London Humphreys. Michael should be good to go. So Kobe White is also probable. Missed last week with undisclosed injury. Oh, I'm glad I went up to my injury updates because I meant to say this and completely forgot earlier. Smael Mondon, Georgia starting linebacker, former 5-star, led Georgia in tackles 2 years ago, finished second last year, is listed as out for this game. It's interesting. I mean, I saw a report, like I said, reports, could be true, could be not. Report that he was injured in practice on Wednesday or Tuesday, and he's out for this one. We have nothing more to go off of than he's out. He was out on the initial report on Wednesday. He's out again on Friday afternoon. I think there will be another update here this evening and another tomorrow, if I'm correct. These SEC availability reports have been weird. I'll just say that. But he's out. So what does that do for Georgia? Well, it gives you an opportunity to play former 5-star Justin Williams, true freshman, first off. You also get to play a guy like Troy Bowles. Todd Bowles is his dad who coaches for the Tampa Bay Bucks. Troy Bowles, very highly rated linebacker. Also, Raylan Wilson and C.J. Allen. Jalen Walker can also play inside. Georgia's going to be fine at linebacker. Georgia recruits linebackers the best in the country, bar none. Best in the country recruiting linebackers. Georgia has plenty stocked up there. These guys are ready to go to improve themselves. This is an opportunity for them to prove themselves even further. So that's kind of the one area Georgia can afford to miss. So keep an eye out on Smael Mondon. Let's get into predictions here. Yeah, let's get into predictions. So I'm going to touch on what I touched on a little bit earlier, which was it was a critical point in Georgia's season last year, this game. And I think I see some similarities here as far as an opportunity for Georgia to bounce back, right? Prove it to themselves that they can have a complete game as far as execution. Because you come off a game against Kentucky, which was horrible execution. You go to Alabama, the first half, horrible execution, and then that second half. You want to put together a complete game if you're Georgia. And I bet you that's what Kirby Smart and these coaches are telling these players right now in Athens. You want to have a complete game. You're going to need one to beat Texas. You're going to need one to beat Ole Miss and Tennessee and to get the SEC championship and ultimately the playoff. That's what you're going to need, right? So this is about building. I think Georgia does it here. They get backed into a corner. That's typically when Georgia is at its best. It was backed into a corner in the second half against Alabama, and I think it will be maybe the best overall product that we've seen on the field here when Auburn comes to town on Saturday afternoon. So I like Georgia to win big in Athens, 34-9. The spread will cover, so keep that in mind. Artie, 35-7. That's his prediction. Now, Artie, I will give Arthur Lynch, who had to make a flight today, so was able to join us. I will give him props. He said Georgia-Alabama was going to be a shootout. I didn't see it that way. Now, he did pick Georgia to win, so shootout in opposite directions, but shout out Artie for getting the shootout last week right. He likes 35-7. Georgia also expects the Bulldogs to rebound here and put a really good product out on the field against Auburn. We'll get into Pick 'em results first. It's been a tough season so far for me. I'm still above 50% though, and we'll ride with that. Artie's having a good season. 15-9 against the spread. We pick 5 game each week. He is 15-9-1. We had a push last week. I did as well. 13-11-1 for me. We'll start out Syracuse at UNLV. Former Georgia assistant Fran Brown, right? He's got former Ohio State quarterback Kyle McCord, who's playing really well for the Orange. I like Syracuse to cover +6, right? So UNLV's getting 6 points at home in Las Vegas. I think Syracuse is tough, right? Fran Brown has done a decent job of kind of adapting that program to what he learned at Georgia. He told David Pollock that this week. Already like Syracuse as well. We'll go Missouri at A&M. Interesting SEC matchup here for Missouri, right? Missouri's coming off an overtime win against Vanderbilt. They went to the wire versus Boston College. They haven't played what looks to be good opponents so far, right? And this was at one point this season a top 10 team. I think they're back at number 9 now, actually. So A&M comes in, has lost Connor Wegman. The backup quarterbacks look so much better. That team has been playing better. They're 2.5-point favorites here at home. If this game was in Missouri, I think it would be the opposite. Missouri might be a slight favorite. I think Missouri is better. I think they've been playing down to their opponents. I think they're better than what they put on the field. That's what I'm feeling in this one. A&M for Artie. He likes Texas A&M to cover 2.5. I'm taking the Tigers. I think I don't trust this A&M team. Give me Missouri here. I think to pull out a gutsy win on the road. Ole Miss get 9.5 points here at South Carolina. I've heard a lot about South Carolina, right? Defensive line, best defensive line in the country. Dylan Stewart, really good. Best defensive line in the country. I'm not sure. I think Ole Miss might have a better one. Here's the thing with Ole Miss. Didn't play great against Kentucky. Georgia fans can sympathize with that, right? Didn't play well against Kentucky. Gave themselves a chance to win at the end, but Brock Vandagriff, was it 4th and 8? Just a monster. 4th and 8. The difference between Bob Stoops against Georgia not going for it on 4th and what? Was it 5? Something like that? With 4 minutes remaining, gives Georgia ball back, and of course that's game. This time from his own 25, 4th and 8. It might have been even further than that. I think the number is missing me, but it's at least 4th and 8, right? And Brock Vandagriff, he gives them the keys and says, go get it, and they do ultimately win the game. Maybe biggest Kentucky win in program history. Ole Miss now, they're in this point where really, really talented. Lane Kiffin has built that team into a title contender. They were last year. They faltered. Here they are with a big chance to get back on track against a Carolina team with a lot of questions. Inexperience on offense. I do like the defensive line. Don't think they're the best in the country. Dylan Stewart, really good, former 5-star. He can absolutely get off the edge. If there's one guy I want to call my offense with maybe one really, really good defensive player or maybe one good position group, it's Lane Kiffin. He's going to find the weakness. He's going to exploit it. I love Jackson Dart. I think he's really, really good. I think this team has a different feeling about them coming into this game. Give me Ole Miss to cover. Tennessee. And sorry, Artie also has Ole Miss. Tennessee at Arkansas. Interesting game here. Arkansas has been in one of the most entertaining programs this season, right? They have. I mean, they go to the wire with everybody. They typically do play down to opponents, but they also play up to their opponents as well. Sam Pittman and the Fighting Razorbacks at home with an opportunity to take down Tennessee. Tennessee's getting 13 points here. We heard a lot about Tennessee. Their defense is playing really well. They haven't played any good offenses, though. Let's just go ahead and make that known. This is week 6, okay? It's all about who you've played and how good the opposition is at certain things. That's going to lead to stats, okay? Tennessee's number 1 total defense. Getting 13 points here in Fayetteville. Arkansas, here's the thing. They can go off and put together just massive drives with the run game, the QB run. Their defense plays scrappy at times. I just think Tennessee's going to open it up here a lot, passing-wise. I think that Arkansas can be beaten there, matchup-wise. Offensively, it's going to be a really, really tough day for Arkansas. But that QB run kind of interests me, though. That QB run, if you can take advantage with that, and it's all over football. It's in NFL, it's in college. You saw it, Georgia, Alabama last week. If you can take advantage of that QB run, take away a defender from the defense, from the Tennessee defense, maybe get some big plays, right? Getting scoring opportunities. I like Arkansas to cover 13. That's the feeling I got. Artie likes Tennessee. I can definitely see both happening, but I just think 13 is a lot. I think Arkansas, even in garbage time, right? 13 points, Tennessee, I'm taking Arkansas. Last game, Miami at Cal. College game day is going to be there, interestingly enough. First time in program history. Marshawn Lynch going to be the college game day guest picker. That'll be really fun, actually. I'm looking forward to that. Miami getting 10 points here. Miami should have lost last week. Let's just go ahead and get that straight. Absolutely should have lost that game. Yeah, it was a touchdown for sure on the Hail Mary. Here's the thing about Miami. Haven't played anybody. They haven't. Now, I love Cam Ward. I think he might go number 1 overall. He's that talented. He looks really comfortable in the pocket, but he did turn the ball over a lot. Was really careless with the ball in the pocket, especially. Nonchalant with it. Maybe that's his play style. That's just what I noticed. He has an opportunity to go on the road and really show why he should be in the Heisman race. And here at Cal, interesting team, right? Because they take down Auburn, who Georgia's about to play here on Saturday, right? And they're getting a lot of hype. I'm not sure if it's warranted or not, especially against a team like Miami, who has a really, really good offense. Defensively, there's some holes there that can be exploited. We saw that last week. I think the question here is, how does Miami look on the road, taking a road trip that far away, right? I don't know if you've seen the Miami equipment truck gaff, right? It was like 1,400 miles in. It was only like halfway to Cal Berkeley. Huge trip for them. I mean, the logistics there, like, can you be fresh when you get on the field? That's the question for me. It's more about that than it is football, because straight football, Miami is gonna, kill Cal, which is I'm gonna give them that benefit of the doubt. I'm gonna give them that benefit of the doubt. The Mario Cristobal's, all the hype. I think they're able to go across country and put out a good product. Miami covers. Already also has Miami to cover. So whether you're listening on wherever you get your podcasts or watching on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube of the Pulse Sports Network, we appreciate you listening. Please drop some comments, questions, concerns, whatever you have. We'd love to hear it. We'll be back, as always, instant reactions after Georgia, Auburn, be a 3:30 kick. So let's say maybe 7 p.m. We'll all see each other again. I'll be back on live instant reactions, my first thoughts. We'll go through the stats. We'll talk about the big picture move forward. Hopefully, a big Georgia win on Saturday, and we can quiet a little bit of noise heading to Mississippi State and then Texas, October 19th.